Why don't we get going? It looks like everybody that we're going to see is on today. So guys, welcome to what is essentially the weekly expert series, expert webinar on overcoming chronic pain and disease. And really, for those that have been with us and then those joining us, our goal is really simple. Quite frankly, it's to apply you with the knowledge to allow you to finally overcome some of the chronic and pain and what we call disease that maybe you haven't got enough relief with, or you're looking for new answers. Maybe you're coming to this. So we're really here just to share the knowledge to really help a new diagnosis to really help you overcome your pain and disease. So thank you very much. Just a couple things off the top we always do. Of course, we're not doctors. We're just providing this information. We don't substitute for a thorough medical exam, especially to rule out rare or rare life-threatening conditions, true tissue disease, cancers, things of that nature. And of course, if you ever get symptoms that are worsening, new, you go ahead and check back in with your doctor. But what we're here to do is really explain that there's a totally different paradigm out here where you can start finding relief. Oh, Jim, welcome, sir.
Jim, all right.
I'm going to unmute you, buddy.
Yeah. Hey, guys. Sorry, I'm a couple minutes late.
Looking good, and I like your shirt.
Thanks, man. This is from Bali, Indonesia, all the way from the East Pacific.
So again, I'm just welcoming everybody, Jim, to the call, letting them know what our goal is to share the information and new diagnosis to where you can finally overcome some chronic pains and disease that we really didn't think you could overcome before. And it's really funny. I say chronic pain, and then sometimes I say disease, or what we call the disease. And first off, I don't know, it's dis-ease, which I always fun play on words, and really it's a dis-ease. But under that dis-ease, we have a whole long list of now diagnoses that you'll hear from your traditional, maybe some alternative practitioners that are really physically based. And so you get this long list of names of disorders to truly try to explain, where your symptoms are coming from. And one of the things I've always noticed, I've been in healthcare for 20 years, and I've seen hundreds of scientific talks. And one of the things I've always noticed is a lot of these diagnoses, these names, are just efficiently sounding ways to say what you already know. So chronic fatigue syndrome, which we're going to talk about today, it just means you're chronically tired. It sounds official. They diagnose you with chronic fatigue, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they know where it's coming from. Or you look at fibromyalgia. Well, that's a very official name. Well, all it means is your muscles and your fibers hurt all over. Or there's something called idiosyncratic pain. So they say, oh, you have idiosyncratic pain. And you're like, oh no. Well, all that means is if you have pain, we don't know where it's from. Well, this is really trying, and what Dr. John Sarno started with is really saying, I think I figured out where the root cause of a lot of this is. And it has an emotional, psychological basis that leads to the physical changes that are causing your symptoms, and not an inherent structural or even immune defect that you cannot reverse. So this is about empowering you with first knowledge, feedback, and these different things to really say, hey, there's a new way. I have new hope. I'm going to try this. I've ruled out other things. I know I'm safe, and I'm going to try this direction. And it takes a lot of courage, confidence building, and things to go this direction. But once you do, you can see amazing results. And in that vein, the title of today's or this week's webinar was Beyond the Back. What I really wanted to focus on, we've talked a lot about back and musculoskeletal pain, and that's where Sarno started, and that's where I got better. And I think Jim and even Rebecca, you recovered from back and musculoskeletal pain. But this is now really kind of seeping into other different disorders. So what we're going to talk today is Rebecca. She is a trained and certified life coach, and now a mind coach. She has a wonderful story that I think you'll really relate to. And I'm really excited from the multiple conversations, Rebecca, we've had that you now have this presentation to give. And I, for one, am looking forward to it. I think everybody else is there. Everybody else is. Now, a couple ground rules. Everybody just listen to the presentation. She's going to present, and then I think you're going to take us through a guided meditation. And then as we come out of that, or you can then in the Q&A section, we're going to try to stay out of the chat section. In the Q&A section, you can chat your questions, and we'll have time at the end to start asking the panel, myself, Rebecca, and Jim, to really kind of address some of your specific questions. So without further ado, I hope all that's clear, and I'll make sure, yeah, there's no chats and Q&A, so it sounds like that's pretty clear. Rebecca, welcome. Thanks for coming on again. I mean, you're a regular panelist, but thank you for presenting today, and you go ahead and take it away.
Thank you so much, Joe. And it's good to see a lot of familiar names here and really the community that's growing. I'm really excited today to talk about emotions because it's such a rich, deep area. And really that is what Dr. Sarno said is at the root of all these different symptoms. It comes down to unconscious emotions. So if you're like me, you might think rage, what's he talking about? I don't feel rageful. I don't even feel angry. So what I want to explain today is sort of the difference between the conscious emotions and thoughts and the unconscious emotions and thoughts. And when Dr. Sarno was talking about these triggers for physical symptoms, he was really mostly talking about unconscious emotions and thoughts. So I'm going to pull up this PowerPoint presentation and we'll just go through it. And like Joe said, we will take questions at the end. This is going to lead into kind of a somatic meditation, so you're able to have an experience with some of the principles that I'm talking about. Can you all see this okay? Yeah, okay, great. So this is Dr. John Sarno, and a lot of the source material I'm drawing from today is from the book, The Mind-Body Prescription, which I really recommend, especially if you have symptoms beyond back pain, which is his first book really focused on. So he discovered that mind-body symptoms encompass many common and harmless physical symptoms. And I think harmless is really the key word there, because when we feel pain or fatigue, we assume there's something wrong with our body. But really, with most chronic stress-related conditions, there's nothing wrong with the body. There's an underlying emotional process that is activating the brain and the nervous system. And the great news is we now know the brain is neuroplastic. We can retrain it. We can change and shift our feeling state in our bodies. So he called it several things: tension myoneural syndrome. You'll hear it abbreviated TMS, mind-body syndrome. It's often these days called neuropathway pain or brain-generated pain. But it's all names for the same thing. And we all experience one or more of these mind-body symptoms in our lives. But Dr. Sarno and others in this field really felt that these mind-body symptoms are responsible for the epidemics of pain and fatigue syndromes in the Western world. And the reason these are such public health problems is because medicine doesn't yet recognize their emotional cause and treat them as such. And part of that is because medical doctors don't receive psychological training. And this is also really an emerging paradigm. So in 1975, Dr. Sarno found that 88% of his patients had histories of up to 5 common mind-body disorders. Now, this is just a partial list, but you can see that it's everything from heartburn and acid indigestion to gastrointestinal problems. Irritable bowel syndrome, he said, was definitely TMS. Common allergies such as hay fever and asthma. For the most part, he said those are mind-body. Skin disorders, eczema, acne, hives, and psoriasis. So often we're really led to believe that there's something wrong with our physical body, or we just need to focus on a physical remedy. Sometimes we do, but like Joe said, assuming other major diagnoses have been ruled out, will be well served to look at the underlying emotional process too. Now, this really surprised me, frequent urinary tract or respiratory infections. So there's a pathological issue there. There's an excess of bacteria. But Dr. Sarno said even in those cases, in his practice, he found that there was an underlying emotional process that was triggering that. So he, of course, realized that all these symptoms are caused by the central nervous system and the brain. And you might ask, well, why on earth would the brain create such an array of physical symptoms, especially excruciating ones or ones that disable us physically? Would anybody else here prefer to just feel your emotions instead of having, debilitating back pain? I'm right there with you. But that's really the kind parental conscious mind that's speaking. There's something else going on beneath the surface. In this wild world of the unconscious mind, 95% of our thoughts and emotions are unconscious. So that means almost everything we're thinking and feeling right now in each moment, we are not aware of. These are things that help us just make snap decisions. They also help us, pick up a glass of water and take a drink even without having to give it a second thought. But this unconscious mind is like a child. It's irrational and unruly, although Sarno described it as more of an angry child than a joyful one. Freud's biographer, Peter Gay, likened it to a maximum security prison with desperate criminals and undesirables under heavy lock and key. And I think that's just such a great analogy because we don't see who's in the prisons. They're outcast from society. Well, this is what happens with these emotions. So emotions that are deemed difficult, conflictual, overwhelming, they are stored in the unconscious mind. We don't even know they're there. They're repressed and we're completely unaware of them. And Sarno actually said it's the unconscious emotions that trigger the brain to create physical symptoms. So how does this happen, that this gets stored up in our unconscious mind? Well, we experience all kinds of stresses just by living through daily life. And if we've had any kind of trauma, most people have had at least trauma with a small t, if not a capital T, whether that's a car accident or the death of a loved one. So that really starts building up in our unconscious. I think also very much in this culture, we are trained to think and not to feel. This poor guy is put in front of this stack of books, and these days it's more like screens. But really, kids aren't trained to feel and use their senses, and they naturally do that. But I think culturally it's drilled out of us, and there becomes certain ways of interacting in the world. I don't know if any of you have heard be seen and not heard, or be polite. These are all things that kind of start closing in our emotional expression. Now, of course, there's good reasons for that, right? We want to fit in with the tribe and fit in with society, but we also want to learn to feel our emotions in a healthy way. So, how about asking your boss to take a rage day? Or worse yet, just exploding in anger at your boss? That would not go over so well. But you have a stomach ache, we'll take the day off full pay. So sometime when we have these questions, why would my brain create these physical symptoms? When you just look at everyday situations, whether it's the workplace or a family gathering, when we used to have those, there's not a lot of tolerance and understanding for emotions. And so we learn other ways of expressing them really, and they come out physically. So how do we recover from stress-related symptoms from an emotional standpoint? Dr. Sarno said there are 3 keys. So the first is really knowing that your symptoms are caused by the brain due to unconscious emotions. So it's trying to basically distract you or protect you from feeling emotions when they get too overwhelming. So sometimes, and especially for people that are coming to these calls, I think there's a lot of people who really love this work and believe in it. And as Dr. Schechter talked about last time, we can understand things on a cognitive level, but understanding it on a visceral level and really accepting it can be important because it just sends a different signal to your nervous system. So whether you keep coming to these calls to gain more knowledge, or you see a TMS educated physician, it is helpful to really kind of accept that, number one. But Sarno also said that we need to understand the reasons for our repressed emotions. So that's being aware of, what else is going on in my life right now. Even if it was a happy event, like you were getting married, that does put stress and pressure on a person. But there might be a relationship tension or anything else. So it's really looking at the underlying reasons for the repressed emotions. And we'll go into that in a few slides. And then Sarno explained, and I've seen this in my own experience, is that in some cases we may need to explore therapy to really become aware of our feelings. And as we learn to feel more, it expands our bandwidth to experience emotion, and it can kind of let some of the steam out in a safe way. So our brain doesn't have to create so many physical symptoms. So there are three main sources of unconscious emotions, those that are generated in childhood. So a lot of times people say, well, nothing that stressful was going on right now. But we do have unconscious emotions, rage, fear, tension that are in our unconscious from childhood. And we now know that when there's adverse childhood experiences, it predisposes somebody to have chronic pain or chronic fatigue later in life. There's also just the stresses of daily life, as you see with this poor guy. And then there's internal conflicts from the TMS personality. Now, I think this could be a whole talk. The TMS personality, do you recognize any of these qualities in yourself? Perfectionistic, self-critical or self-pressuring, low self-esteem, someone who wants to do good in the world, but holds in your emotions in order to please others, or just because it's become a coping strategy. So I can probably fess up to about all of these. And that personality conflict is something, it may be somewhat baked in, but we can look at it and be aware of it and relieve a little bit of pressure that way. So, I think of it here as like a cup of water is just a glass is filling with water, and we have childhood and we have daily stresses, and then maybe the water's getting close to the top. And so the unconscious mind realizes, well, this is reaching a boiling point, and to protect us from something that we might, from having a nervous breakdown or some sort of an explosion of anger, it puts a lid on that glass of water so those emotions can't spill over the lid. And instead, there's a process where the brain then creates physical symptoms. These are some of the things. Joe mentioned chronic fatigue syndrome. That was what I dealt with for 13 years. Fibromyalgia, allergies, all these different kind of pain and fatigue disorders that traditional medicine doesn't have really effective strategies to solve, can respond really well to this type of work. So this might be a little small to read, but I wanted to include this curable graphic just to show, because if you think, well, this seems kind of woo-woo, why would my brain, or how would my brain really create these symptoms? You can see in this left-hand column here in pink, any of these stresses, whether it's relationship woes or anxiety or unresolved painful memories, social isolation, which is an issue now with COVID, that goes into the brain as input. And that shifts the state of the brain. So the blood flow shifts from the frontal lobes, which is really our conscious way of thinking, into the limbic system, which is more emotional, reaction, flight, fight, or freeze based. And when that happens, the brain actually can affect all sorts of tissues, muscles, blood flow, nervous system, heart, gastrointestinal symptoms. And because of that restricted blood flow and thus oxygen, you can feel pain almost anywhere in the body, tingling, numbness, burning, IBS and bladder symptoms, palpitations, rapid heartbeat, and headaches. So the good news is you can see in that bottom green square that, you know, the nervous system can learn to feel these sensations and get stuck in a loop, but we can shift it out with this knowledge and also learning to feel our emotions. So on that note, here are 3 questions to ask yourself. What was happening in my life when my symptoms began? What was my emotional state at that time? And how do I feel about my symptoms now? A lot of times the symptoms that are the emotions that we feel about our symptoms are deeper rooted than that. But just asking these simple questions can really bring more awareness to the whole process. So we're kind of calling it out. Okay, I know there's some underlying emotions here. There's nothing wrong with my body. What is going on? And then learning to feel into those, which we'll do a little bit of that today. So I am going to use myself as a guinea pig. A couple of the things I'm going to talk about are sensitive. I won't go into graphic detail, but if anything is triggering to you, you're welcome to just turn off the audio for a minute or so. Probably we'll be talking about this for a couple minutes. So I like to look at a symptom timeline, when different symptoms arose, what was happening in our outer world, and what were the underlying emotional states to kind of piece this picture together. So for me, at age 20, I just was going through a lot of college and internship stress. And then I actually suffered a sexual assault, and it was a very terrifying experience. I wasn't in an environment where people talked about that. I had no idea who to talk to, and I just completely held it in. I really didn't tell anybody. And I just went on with my life. But shortly after, sure enough, I was in a car accident, and I developed awful back pain for years. And this was just in my early 20s. No one could figure out why. The underlying emotion was frustration, which is really a form of anger. I used to be a runner, then I started developing knee pain, and there was a lot of fear coming up over that. And then when I was in a relationship after that, I started developing urinary tract infections in a chronic way. So these symptoms would bring up these underlying emotions here. And I didn't really know at that time that they related to these life events and really trauma. So now fast forward to age 35, I went through a breakup of an engagement, which was stressful. My father began a real decline in his health. He got very sick with heart issues. We have a really close family. And then I actually experienced another sexual assault. So at that point, I got a virus, and it seemed like it was just a virus, but my entire system crashed. I was terrified. I was angry, but I didn't know why. And I went to see all kinds of doctors, and the diagnosis was chronic fatigue syndrome, sometimes fibromyalgia, Epstein-Barr syndrome, post-viral syndrome, all kinds of things, sometimes even hypothyroidism. I was just in despair. And then I was diagnosed with interstitial cystitis. Now that's actually, it feels just like a UTI, a urinary tract infection, but there's no bacteria. It becomes a chronic condition. And Dr. Sarno and Dr. Schubiner say this is absolutely TMS. So then we move on from the years of age 35 to 48. Because the symptoms were so severe with the chronic fatigue syndrome, I actually lost my career. I couldn't work I really couldn't do much of anything for several years. I couldn't leave the house much. I could just sort of barely take care of myself. So losing my income, career, house, engagement. And then it just happened that 4 close family members died during those years, and it felt like a real breakup of our close extended family. So what I didn't realize at the time was all those emotional stresses worsened the symptoms. And they did, they got worse and worse. I thought it was because of the viruses and malfunctioning mitochondria, which is what I had been told. All this just increased fear, anxiety, sadness. Doctors told me I'd have to live like this forever, frustration. And eventually, actually about probably 10 years into this morass, I turned really almost exclusively to meditation, yoga, art. I really gave up the need to try to heal physical remedies because the roller coaster was so exasperating. And I really hadn't explored Sarno's work yet. That changed my feeling state. I really was in a state of peace and acceptance for about a year, even though I still had flu-like symptoms and insomnia almost around the clock. It was a really interesting dichotomy, and I think that acceptance set me up for a light bulb moment to really get this TMS work. So the reason I'm telling my story is so it may help you connect the dots with your story and sort of look for the key factors. So then in this period of acceptance, I did meet someone who had recovered from chronic fatigue syndrome using Sarno's work. She told me all about it. I completely got how it was related to me. I just had this light bulb moment that I'm actually not sick. It's my brain creating this. And I was so relieved. And I literally went from being homebound. It was in the winter of 2018. I had a lot of symptoms and I just ran around the block. And I was like, this is just amazing. From this knowledge, from really getting it on a visceral level, I feel I've recovered. It did take some other work over the next year. And I will say the work is really satisfying. You know, you just become, I think, a more understanding, embodied person. So, because some symptoms would come back, I worked with this wonderful mind-body coach, Jim Prusak, here on the line, who just really helped me over a period of about 8 months to kind of stabilize these gains in my system. So exploring the events that led up to the CFS, I learned to feel physical and emotional sensations in the body. And by doing that, it helped me process some of these repressed emotions. That perfectionistic nature is, I'm still working on that. But I can't say I've totally kicked that, but I'm aware of it more so when it happens. So for all of you, when symptoms are present, instead of focusing on physical remedies, you can ask, what am I feeling now? And I'll ask this multiple times throughout the day, especially if I'm having a lot of symptoms. I'll ask, what am I feeling emotionally now? Because there's something going on. Some part of my brain feels scared or is trying to tell me something or is just stuck in an old loop. Bringing the attention to the emotions. Reassure yourself you're safe and okay. You know, once you've accepted this is a harmless process, it causes symptoms, but it's not harming me, you really are safe and okay, right? It's just your brain creating symptoms to distract you from those emotions. So you can journal about your emotions, just kind of let it out. Then sometime I'll rip up the paper. You can talk to someone you trust. Learn to feel into the body sensations. And Jim led us through a somatic tracking meditation a couple weeks ago that was wonderful. I'm going to do a little bit of that today. And do the things you want anyway. That's a really important part. Even Dr. Sarno acknowledged the role of soothing and enjoyable activities to kind of counterbalance this internal stress in the unconscious mind. So in closing, I couldn't help but put up my new website since it went live today. There is you can get a free audio meditation on that, or you're welcome to just ask me any questions. And I just wanted to close with a couple thoughts from Howard Schubiner. I think it's interesting. Sometimes these symptoms really are teaching us to be more honest in our life. You know, when you say yes and you really mean no, your brain may protect you with physical symptoms and make you not able to do the thing you said yes to. When you feel unconscious stress or overwhelm, pain is your brain's solution. So as we explore these emotions, though, we look at what life changes may be needed. We feel and see what's beneath the surface. When we feel the feelings, they're no longer needed. And so that turns down our danger alarm system and therefore the symptoms. So that is it for the PowerPoint. And what I want to do, if everybody's okay, is go into a somatic meditation. And, you know, you can get completely comfortable if you want, even just get a drink of water. You can lay down if you're not already. The great thing about this Zoom feature where we don't see you, I kind of miss seeing you all, but sometimes it can be more relaxing when you're not on camera. So feel free to just get in a comfortable place, sitting or laying down. And Joe, does that work for me to just go right into this? Oh, you know what? You're muted.
You are doing phenomenal, Rebecca. And I think this is for me to get a little relaxation. And I'm going to speak for Jim too and everybody on the line. I'm sure there's a lot of questions. I have a couple, but let's enjoy ourselves and have a nice quiet moment, shall we?
Yes, thank you so much, Joe. We all deserve a quiet moment, and we've all probably had either busy days or some challenge today to get us to this moment. So let's just enjoy, kick back in your chair or lay down on a sofa or a bed and just really take this space out for yourself. This will be probably 7 to 10 minute meditation. So let yourself just really sink into the surface that you're on, letting go of any muscle tension that you don't need. Turning your attention downward and inward. If they're not already, your eyelids are starting to get heavy and you can let your eyes close. If your mind gets really busy when you close your eyes, you can always open them again and just continue to follow my suggestions. Know that this is a space and a time to feel what's present in your body, which is healthy for our whole nervous system, no matter what it feels like. Notice first the weight of your body. Let it all go. Let yourself be fully supported. Feel too the presence or the energy of your body. With your eyes closed, what do you feel? What's that subtle energy animating your body? Bring your attention now to the back of your body, so whatever is touching the surface that holds you. If you're sitting, notice your feet on the floor, as well as the places your legs and your back contact the chair or the couch. Feel all those places of contact. If you're lying down, you might notice the entire back of your body, from head to toe, being supported by the surface. Which places are heaviest and which are lightest? What parts of your body drop down to the surface and which curve upwards? Do you notice any textures of your clothes or the furniture on your skin? Just see if they're soft or hard, scratchy or smooth. Be curious about the back of your body, knowing that you are held and supported. Now bring in your breath awareness. So just observe its natural rhythm in this moment. There's no need to change the breath. Just see what it feels like to be breathed. Notice what it feels like on the inside as you breathe. You might sense the flow of air through your nostrils, or perhaps the rise and fall of the chest or the belly. You may even hear the breath. As thoughts come to you, and they inevitably will, because the brain just generates thoughts, that's its job, but just don't attach to them. Let them pass by like birds in the sky. There's no need to change anything at all, including the thoughts, but just let them pass and return to the body sensations of the breath. And are you still aware of the back of the body? Can you hold those 2 points of focus, the back of the body and the breath? You might find one of them is more helpful than the other, which you can incorporate now and in other times in your life. This practice is calming and healing for our nervous system when we really feel into the body sensations. It tells our brain, I'm paying attention and I'm okay. And really, that's the truth. In this moment, we have everything that we need. Now bring your attention to the most prominent sensation in your body. Just scan your body. There may be something very obvious that brought you to this call. It could be an ache in your back. It could be a fluttering in your stomach or a dullness in your head. And I've presented a lot, so you might even notice an emotion welling up, such as sadness or fear or anger or even joy. Even those emotions have sensations, and we don't even need to name them, but notice if it feels more like an emotional sensation or a physical sensation. Where is it located in your body? What does it feel like? Just really track that one sensation, whether it's physical or emotional, with curiosity, but not with intensity. Just like you're watching clouds in the sky, but instead you're just watching a sensation in your body, knowing that even if it's uncomfortable, it's okay, it's safe. It doesn't need to go away or change. We're just feeling it and sensing it. What are its characteristics? These can help us really move into that felt space. So just use my words as pointers. Is there a pulsing or steady quality? Is it localized or widespread? Maybe there's some warmth or some coolness. You might notice aching or burning, tingling, fluttering, or numbness, but even numbness has some kind of sensation. Just allow yourself to drop into the felt experience of being alive, and if any emotion arises, just let it. If it doesn't, that's okay too. If that sensation moves, just move with it. If it stays the same, that's okay. But the simple act of lovingly paying attention tells the nervous system, I'm okay. And it actually rewires the brain by communicating that everything is safe. Because what you're feeling now is just sensation that your brain is creating. And it's actually healthy for us to feel sensations. So check in again. Is the sensation moving? Has it shifted in intensity? There's no goal, just noticing. And now you can let that sensation go as your primary awareness and return to the breath. So tune in again to the felt experience of the breath inside of you. Notice if the breath is shifted at all. See how it feels as the air rises and falls in your interior spaces. You may again even hear the sound of the breath. It's just like an ocean tide that easily comes in and out. We don't have to do anything but allow it and notice it. And then again, can you feel the back of your body? What parts touch the surface that's holding you? And just feel yourself again grounded in the space with the bottoms of your feet or your seat or your back, whatever parts are being supported. Just notice that sensation. There may be a pressure, but it's probably a neutral one. And if you're in a process or you're really enjoying this or feeling something deeply, you can continue. But otherwise, you can just come back with me here very slowly, just remembering now that you are in the space, in the room that you are in, bringing your awareness back to my voice, the class. You can look around the room. Just knowing that you've done something healing for yourself just by taking a time out and paying attention to the sensations in your body. And know that you can return to these practices or any of them that help you anytime you have symptoms or you're just feeling stressed. And just do this for yourself. So that concludes the meditation and my talk. And I will now toss it back to Joe and just see if we want to take questions. Or Joe, I know you have an incredible story yourself, so I'm not sure how much you want to share that today.
Yeah, so like you said, I want to give time for the people on the call, their Q&A. So people might be, and I'll check in a moment, typing some Q&A questions, and they're coming in. I want to maybe even start with a question of my own as those are being typed in. And I want to first thank you. I mean, the breakdown of Sarno in real terms, and then layering on a little bit of additional insight on top of that was one of the best I've seen done. Number two, that guided meditation was very good. Both you and Jim do very good jobs at that, but you're patient, and that was incredibly well done. So I want to thank you for that. And we're going to talk a little bit about now, just kind of moving forward and what certain people can do. And yes, someone did ask if they can hear this again. So most definitely, I do want to encourage everyone to listen to this talk again. Just like I talk about when you read Dr. Sarno's books, reading it twice is very key, or at least reading it once and then going back to sections in the book, because it goes to a deeper level now that you've thought about it once. Read the book again. So we'll talk about that in a moment. But my first question, and then I'll get to the other questions, is one of the things you brought up is you're still a perfectionist a bit by nature, or you still get angry at times, or you still have these emotions, but yet you've overcome the symptoms. Can you talk about why that is? Why can you still have these emotions, but now you don't have the symptoms as much? What do you think the key is to that?
Yeah, well, that's a great point, because a lot of people really recover from this work just by learning what's happening in their mind, right? That there's nothing broken in their body. And that alone eases so much stress and tension on our system, thinking that we're damaged and, we're never going to be able to heal. So the knowledge is really helpful. Yeah, in terms of some of the other factors, I think for me, I did need to go into the emotions and process some of that. And I had experienced significant trauma. I noticed that when people have more trauma, it can be more important to do that than when people happen to just perhaps get pain because they were going through a little stress in their life. They may just really get it with the Sarno knowledge. Yeah, and the perfectionism, right. Dr. Sarno fortunately said you don't have to change completely who you are, because really perfectionism is an early coping strategy to learn to adapt to something in childhood where we felt we had to prove ourselves and we didn't feel accepted. So it's a pretty ingrained personality trait. You don't have to change it. But I think being aware of it, like with my website, building it now, I wanted to perfect everything, and I just kind of gave my inner perfectionist some chocolate eventually and called it a day. It's like, okay, this is not worth it. Who am I trying to please? It's kind of realizing it's not really as urgent as it feels. I created that perfectionistic strategy at an early time in childhood where it felt urgent to be liked and accepted. So also I kind of connected the dots back to some family relationships and reasons that developed. And I think that can ease the charge a little bit.
No, I think your presentation did really well, because I think what Sarno does is it lays the foundations we've talked about. How repressed emotions are the root cause of these things, how your brain is creating a distraction, why it does that. And so he was very good at actually then going towards your actual symptom resolution, getting rid of your symptoms. And then he talks about some of the additional things you can do, which you are now introducing, is going even deeper, because that getting rid of your symptoms and then empowering yourself to say, I have control over my health, and have an insight to yourself and how powerful you are, is that great first step. But as you're talking about going through the meditations, thinking about people doing therapy, you're starting to really dig in deeper to, okay, what's really going on down there? Now, you can get rid of symptoms without being perfectly at peace or anywhere close.
Yes.
And that's kind of why I brought up the point is you don't need to be perfect to start getting rid of your symptoms. These things, perfectionism, anger, whatever, are still going to be with you. And that's a lifelong thing. But you can start with the symptoms and empowering yourself. Would you agree with that statement?
Oh, absolutely. Right, because we don't want to use this knowledge to beat ourselves over the head that we've got to conquer perfectionism, because that's the perfectionism doing it, right? Anything that is pressure or stress is really kind of part of this whole dynamic. So it's just seen, this is a part of my personality. I've come to appreciate that I do strive for excellence. I like that part of my personality. You can kind of reframe it when it starts getting just feeling so overwhelming. Just kind of ask, well, what am I feeling? And why am I doing this? Is this really serving me?
And that goes from looking at a physical model to a more emotional, psychological model.
Yes.
Dr. Sarno says, don't think physical, think psychological. That transition, and what that just really means is what's inside of you, how your brain is working. Jim, do you have something to add? Any thoughts?
Rebecca, great, fantastic talk. I really enjoyed it in the meditation. I think one of the best things I liked about it was that slide where you asked the 3 questions, because that gets to the heart of like getting to the emotional piece, right? Versus just being, okay, maybe it's physical. When you go back and you say, what was going on in my life around this time? What were these feelings then? Because usually you'll come across something or more than one thing that could be a trigger or something emotional that could lead to the physical symptoms. So I really like that you put that in there to look back in time and link the emotional with the physical.
Thank you, Jim. That's quite a high compliment from my own mentor. Jim, I've listened to his meditations hundreds of times, similar to the meditation I did with you all, but a little bit different. And I feel that was a key part of my healing, is like retraining the unconscious mind, especially before bed. I would listen to those messages, and then it kind of sinks into your psyche. But yeah, I think the asking those questions, Jim, is really important, is because you saw that even though I had the car accident and then the back pain started after the car accident, really it had followed something that was emotionally overwhelming. And I think it had much more to do with that than the car accident, because I really wasn't seriously injured physically in that car accident, but emotionally I was. So just asking those questions can really shift things. And anyone, feel free to type questions in the chat. I appreciate all the great.
I have one for you.
Oh, good.
So let's see. I haven't even read it yet, so I'm going to read it. We're all going to hear it at once. Sarno says eating disorders, or TMS. Having practiced anorexia and over-exercising in my past, it's hard to see as TMS since I choose to actively practice both. My abdominal chronic pain started while still practicing both. After my gallbladder surgery, I stopped exercising and stepped back from my anorexia, and my chronic pain got worse. With education about TMS, my pain has lessened some, but still present each day. I'm letting go of my primary TMS symptom with my eating disorder. Let's see. You see that? I think letting go of my primary TMS symptom with my eating disorder, it seemed to be such a strong suppressor. I'm assuming since my pain is remaining, to explore my emotions versus focusing on the education. A little bit to unwind, but who has a handle on it?
Thank you so much for sharing this. And I'm really empathetic. Well, one thing I want to say, and I'd love to hear from Jim or Joe as well, but, I don't think it's an either or, the emotions or the education. If you feel you're really grounded in the education and you are getting stuck, then I think looking at the emotions can be a really key piece. I know it was for me. So I'm just looking back over this question. I mean, we know there's the symptom imperative. So when one symptom kind of dies down, another can flare up, whether that's the eating disorder or the pain. And I think that both the education and feeling the underlying emotions, depending on which one you really need more of, can help change that dynamic, so you're not necessarily getting this kind of smorgasbord of symptoms. There may still be one symptom dying down and another coming up, but it can certainly lessen, and it is possible to recover completely from what you're naming. Did I understand that question completely? Do you, Jim?
Yeah, I think I can add a little bit to it, but go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I'll just say, linking back to what Rebecca said with the questions, I would just go right to those and say, well, what was going on in your life? And also you can go look at the actual conditions, so eating disorders and over exercising. If you were to sit still and just, let's say, not engage in one of those for a moment, what emotions would come up in you? Would it be fear? Would it be some anger? Would it be some sadness? Would it be a mix? So you can start to just get a sense of some of the emotions, and then you can even link those emotions back to what's the things in your life that you're angry about, that you're sad about, that you're scared of, and start to chip away. There may be some other issues of some trauma, or we don't know your personal history, but it sounds like these are things that are definitely TMS related, or can be. And I'm glad you are engaging in the knowledge, and that's the first step, I think. And then the deeper work is the emotional work, which can come second.
Yeah, and that's a good point, to really apply those questions to yourself. And you could even ask, what am I stuffing? With the eating disorder, sometimes there really is a pretty direct correlation between what's happening physically and psychologically. So maybe there are emotions that you're stuffing, or stressors in your life. So I would, and you know, a practice I like, Nicole Sachs does journal speak. I just do when I'm really frustrated or upset or unclear about something, I'll just do free writing where I just write out all my emotions. And Dr. Schechter's workbook covers this too, but how you're feeling about the symptoms, how you're feeling about what's happening in your life. And that can be one way to get more clarity and also just sort of release some of that. So that's one possibility. And you know,
Yeah,
you even look into a TMS trained therapist if you haven't already.
yeah. I mean, and again, I think, like you said, as these things jump around and you go through life and you deal with different challenges, you look at kind of the underlying common denominators. And like you said, maybe the things that are causing you to maybe have an eating disorder are things that you're trying to cover up yourself with your own actions. So maybe you're choosing to do it on a conscious level. Say, I'm going to do this. You're acting out something. It doesn't happen to you, but it's a response to something. It's your own distraction, right? And then maybe you quit that. Maybe you evolve. But if you still haven't reached the core of what's driving some of your behavior, then it might develop into some of these pain disorders, and it can move around until your brain is satisfied that it doesn't need to protect you anymore. You're going to have some that it can change and manifest in all sorts of different ways. It's just something you'll continue to explore, and maybe maybe you get some therapy. Maybe you start talking about this to somebody if you're not doing it already. Something Sarno suggests, psychotherapy, talking to somebody, maybe getting it out in a safe space, because talking to someone who's trained in that, who doesn't have an emotional connection to you, a family member, a husband, and so it's a different way to kind of express things, to maybe unwind some of what you feel.
Yeah, and I know when you're experiencing lots of different symptoms over time, it can get frustrating. You can think, why isn't this working for me? But I really believe there's an answer. Sometimes it's just finding that missing link. It's wonderful that you continue to do this work and you're showing up. And I really believe there is an answer for you. There's two more questions, but one of them is about an eating disorder. So I just want to briefly address this. It's certainly not my specialty, but somebody did ask, I think it may have been the same person, how is an eating disorder considered TMS when you choose to practice it versus having a symptom happen to you? Well, the thing is, your unconscious mind really just wants to distract you from feeling the emotion. So it can use pain, it can use an eating disorder, it can use fear. Whatever really keeps you fixated on something else, so you're not seeing and being with the underlying conflict, that's really the same dynamic at play.
Yeah, very good. So I think people are thinking, okay, here where I am, I'm at somewhere along this the recovery, maybe at the very beginning, maybe at the middle, dealing with some things still. What can you do? So I guess I just maybe throw out some concepts to say what my opinion is what you do. What do you start with? So you start with the books. You start with rereading the books. You can start. Then where do you go from there? Well, you could see a TMS trained doctor or another, a doctor to make sure he's already ruled out everything physical. You can do a guided journal. So I even put together my program with some of those initial steps to build the foundation. It has Dr. Schechter's Mind Body Journal. It has the book. It has the 3 do's and don'ts you want to look at every day, and you want to really kind of absorb that on a deep level. Some other things you can consider: psychotherapy or regular therapy, seeing a coach like Rebecca, seeing a coach and a physical therapist like Jim. So I'm trying to think of some additional things. Hear more patient testimonials. Keep coming to these calls. To just continue to build up what is your mind, to find that final puzzle piece. And eventually it's you. All these things at the end of the day are to motivate you to make the decision that you are okay, that you can move forward. And it's very hard to get there. Do not beat yourself up if you don't get there. It takes time. It could happen at any moment, but it can take time. So keep working, and that would be my suggestion. As you know, like I said, I'm not a medical doctor, I'm not a specialist in some of these things. I rely heavily on the books and the journaling to understand this about myself, getting therapy, listening to patient testimonials, and time to time it clicks. Even use a little bit of my gosh darn it, I'm fed up, to move forward, to say I'm tired of the fear, I'm tired of just being stuck. So it's just whatever works for you, and things will continue to come up your whole, for time to time, and you'll just have to continue to this. But at least you have another way, a new diagnosis through these calls and these books. So, yeah. So we're at time. I think we're good with the questions right now. So Rebecca, once again, tell them your website. By the way, Rebecca, on your website, do you have a screening questionnaire yet, to where you say, I think most people on the call accept they have TMS of some disorder, some way, but do you have something to reassure them, or to say, okay, that is me?
I have that same questionnaire from Dr. Schechter that you have.
Yeah.
I put together some questions when I work with clients that I ask.
Okay.
I don't really have a questionnaire on my website. Joe, would you mind if we just answer this one question from Renee? It came in on the chat.
Hey, you're the boss on this one.
One more.
You go for it.
I know sometimes we go a little bit over, but she was saying, I have a variety of pains and symptoms, including leg pain, headache, esophageal spasm, burning, weakness. They're strong at times and move around. I've overcome other TMS symptoms, wonderful, anxiety, panic attacks, back pain. So this works, which is great to build that evidence. I've been checked by many specialists. The only thing they find is elevated CRP. Could the doubt of inflammation causing these crazy symptoms be holding me back from healing? Yeah.
Sorry, I missed that question. Good, thank you. Yeah, good.
No, that's okay. And I may also toss this to Jim because he helped me a lot with this, but the doubt really can. And I think to you, Renee, and also to the previous anonymous question, it's sort of finding what piece are you hung up on, or what piece haven't you fully explored. If the belief that this is really TMS is causing you to distract yourself by looking for all kinds of physical remedies, focusing on the physical sensations, not just being present to your emotions. If it's activating that danger alarm signal in your brain because you're really feeling something's wrong with me, I'm inflamed, that can kind of keep that cycle in play. So it can be helpful if you haven't already seen a TMS informed physician to get that diagnosis possibly. Sometimes I think too, what I felt with myself is like, I'm just going to act as if this is 100% what's going on because nothing else has worked. Like, what do you have to lose to really go for it and say, I'm just going to give this TMS thing my all for the next month or whatever. I'm not telling anyone not to get necessary medical treatment, but really making that turn. Now, I think even Sarno himself and certainly Alan Gordon, the psychologist, says, you're always going to have some doubt. You still can recover when there's some doubt. But when it's really like activating your nervous system, then it probably is interfering.
I have something to add, but Jim?
Yeah, great. That's a great response, Rebecca. I think coming back again to this emotional component, you've had a number of symptoms and you overcome some, but as you can see, a lot of other ones, it's like whack-a-mole. The next one pops up or it moves around. And what I see a lot in people now, it's really interesting, is that when they're getting in touch with sometimes an emotion in a session, it immediately goes into a physical symptom. Whether the emotion is fear, like an anxiety, or anger, is very common to shift right into the physical pathway. So see if you can, any of these symptoms you have now, ask yourself, how do they make you feel emotionally? I'd love to look at the words, that word inflammation, the doubt of inflammation. So the doubt is a fear, right? But what's the word inflammation? What emotion would you say correlates with inflammation? Probably anger, right? So a lot of the words we use sort of, work towards what we're feeling. Like, I love the word inflammation. It feels like I aggravated it. That's another anger. It's inflamed, it's irritated, it's burning. Those are all anger words. So you can kind of look at your language, but just come back to that emotional piece as much as you can, and try to get back to that, because all these physical things as you're seeing are just going to get your attention and try to keep you going in circles.
And thanks, Jim. And I'm really fascinated with this because I don't think we know or really appreciate the bounds of just what our body is able to do in response to the distraction and what our brains can do. And what I mean by that is I got over my back pain, and yes, a spine disorder showed up on imaging. But guess what? I still had Crohn's disease. And when they went in and gave me a colonoscopy, I had major inflammation in my terminal ileum. I had to go to a hospital a couple of times. I went to ERs. So all my labs were off the charts bad too. But that was, in my opinion, because I've overcome it, that was all a reaction to the anger and some of the things that I was dealing with and the things I was doing response to that. Someone brought up anorexia. Well, I would do other things to respond to this anger, what I thought I needed to do, and this and that. And that, when I realized, was causing me to get sick, it went away. And then my labs went back to normal. My imaging went back to normal, and I never got really sick again. I stopped all diets. I stopped all exercises. I stopped looking on the internet. And I was like, it's my emotions again. And it took me time to learn that. So I would argue elevated CRPs and labs is not an indication that something is inherently physically wrong with you. It means that you still have this emotional turmoil that's bringing along the physiological things that can lead to these lab anomalies. And that's exactly what was happening to me on a major scale. And everything went back to homeostasis once I realized I was okay. But it took a long time for me to really believe that. So
Joe, I
that's
hope
my part of the story.
You tell more of your story. I know I spent a lot of time today, but in another webinar that you tell more of your story, because it's incredible how many things you've recovered from.
Yeah, and I had chronic fatigue, as we talked about. I had fatigue for years. I woke up worried that I wasn't going to have enough energy to do everything I needed to do, to pay the bills, to make sure I was a good husband, to make sure I was a good father. I napped every day. And once I realized that was all a reaction or a distraction, or a defense mechanism against anxiety and worry, I slowly got better. So I have more energy now. I can stay up all through the day. And I've had to do tons of work, and I still have to do tons of work. So don't think that's over behind you, but you slowly get better and you leapfrog one thing after another.
Somebody had asked if they can receive a copy of these slides after the webinar, and I'm happy to share those. So actually, this was my first time using PowerPoint, so I'd have to see how to share that, but it's really intuitive.
Yeah, you did well.
If you want to, I don't know, Joe, if you want to send those out, or you can just email me directly at RebeccaTolin@iCloud.com. I'll find a way to get them to you.
And I'm going to also put the recording on the website. So you'll go to the simplysarno.com. You'll go to the top, you'll scroll over to lectures, and it's maybe a drop-down box. Hit the lectures, scroll down, you'll find this. So go to simplysarno.com, go to lectures across the top of the screen, and you'll scroll down, and I'll post it by tomorrow afternoon, the recording. So you'll be able to watch that again over the weekend.
I noticed Jim's Somatic tracking YouTube video has like a record number of views because it's so relaxing. So that's a good one too. Jim's YouTube channel has a great meditation.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Joe, for organizing these and just.
My pleasure. You did a phenomenal job. Phenomenal job, Rebecca. You're going to make a great coach. You're going to make a huge contribution to this space. You're very impressive. I learned a lot. I've been doing this for a long time, but I've never seen somebody nail it in that degree on that slide, at least how I think things should be said. So I think that was awesome. So Jim, you're doing phenomenal work out there. You helped Rebecca. So here we are. The world goes full circle. So Thanks everybody for joining. I will be also posting next month's schedule soon, so you'll be able to register for that soon. Probably within about a week. Within that time, we'll have the speakers lined up, so look for that. Probably be the last 3 Wednesdays of the month. So we'll have a week break here to go all do our own work, listen to this talk again, do some meditations. Let's go to Jim's website and watch some of his YouTube videos. So we got time, and then I'll see you in about 2 weeks' time.
Thanks,
Thank you, everybody.
For all the great
Everybody. Okay.
Take care.
All right, see you guys. See you, Jim. See you. Good job.